with this book. Black Book of Questions in the mail. And look at this thing. Honestly,
a raging river can flood a village and destroy everything in its path. But channel that same water through a hydroelectric dam, and suddenly the destructive force becomes electricity that lights up an entire city. The water has not changed. Its molecular structure remains identical. What has changed is the direction, the architecture through which it flows. Napoleon Hill observed this exact principle operating in the human body, and he made a stunning declaration. Most men are the flooded village. They allow their most primal, most potent biological drives to wreak havoc on their lives, scattering their focus, depleting their vitality, and leaving them exhausted in the wreckage of squandered potential. But the man who achieves greatness, he is the dam. He takes that same raw, surging force and redirects it upward, transforming destruction into illumination, chaos into creative power. The genius does not possess different energy than the failure. He simply understands the physics of redirection. There exists a chapter in Think and Grow Rich that most readers skip entirely, a passage that has been misunderstood, whispered about, and deliberately ignored for nearly a century. Chapter 11 bears the provocative title, The Mystery of Sex Transmutation, and Napoleon Hill himself warned that this single concept separates those who achieve monumental success from those who remain trapped in mediocrity. The discomfort surrounding this chapter is precisely why it remains the most powerful. Hill did not write it to titillate or scandalize. He wrote it because after studying over 500 of the wealthiest, most influential men of his era, he discovered an undeniable pattern. These men possessed something beyond ambition, beyond discipline, beyond even vision. They had learned to harness a force that the average person wastes carelessly, a biological battery that most drain completely without ever realizing they are throwing away their most potent source of creative fuel. Men fail, Hill insisted, not because they lack intelligence or opportunity, but because they fundamentally misunderstand the nature of their own energy. They treat their most powerful stimulus as if it were merely a physical appetite to be satisfied, a tension to be released, a drive to be exhausted. In doing so, they pour rocket fuel onto the ground and wonder why they never achieve liftoff. The mystery Hill speaks of is not mystical or metaphysical in the supernatural sense. It is a mystery only because we have been conditioned to ignore it, to treat the subject as taboo, to avert our eyes from the very mechanism that could unlock our highest potential. But you are here because you sense there is more. You recognize that the greatest minds in history operated on a frequency that eludes the masses, and you are ready to understand the physics of genius. Let us establish something immediately. This exploration has nothing to do with morality, religion, or lifestyle prescriptions. We are not here to discuss virtue or vice, abstinence or indulgence. We are here to discuss physics, pure and simple. Energy is energy. It can be measured, redirected, and transmuted from one form into another according to immutable laws. What Hill discovered is that sexual energy represents the most concentrated, most potent form of creative life force available to the human organism. It is the biological imperative that drives every living creature to create, to build, to overcome obstacles, to achieve the seemingly impossible for the sake of survival and reproduction. This drive makes the timid suddenly brave. It transforms the lazy into the relentlessly active. It overrides rational thought and compels action with a force that no other stimulus can match. The secret Hill uncovered is this, that energy is convertible. It can be channeled from the desire for physical contact into the desire for financial conquest, artistic creation, or intellectual achievement. The same energy that drives a man toward romantic pursuit can be redirected to drive him toward building an empire, composing a symphony, or solving an equation that changes the world. In this documentary, we will excavate the lost chapter. We will examine the specific mechanics Hill outlined for capturing your rawest biological drive and transmuting it into the sustained fuel for infinite creativity and wealth. We will explore why the greatest achievements in human history have come from individuals who understood this principle, whether consciously or instinctively. This is not theory. This is not philosophy. This is the instruction manual for the human generator, and if you apply it with precision and discipline, you will access a reservoir of power you did not know existed. The village can remain flooded, or it can be lit by 1,000 lights. The water is already there. The only question is whether you will build the dam. Napoleon Hill teaches us something that challenges our entire understanding of human energy. Sexual energy is not merely a biological function designed solely for reproduction. It is, in its essence, creative energy in its most raw, unrefined, and powerful form. When we examine the mechanics of any creative act, we find at its core the same impulse that drives all life forward, the urge to generate something new, to bring into existence that which did not exist before. The artist who stands before a blank canvas, the entrepreneur who envisions a company that does not yet exist, the scientist who pursues a hypothesis against all conventional wisdom, each is driven by the identical force that perpetuates the species itself. Hill recognized that this force represents the most powerful stimulus known to human consciousness. It overrides fatigue. It silences doubt. It makes the impossible seem suddenly achievable. Consider for a moment the lengths to which this drive compels action. Throughout history, men have crossed oceans, conquered nations, composed immortal poetry, and risked everything they possessed, all in pursuit of romantic conquest. This same energy, when left in its base channel, causes intelligent men to make catastrophically poor decisions, to abandon reason, to sacrifice their futures for momentary satisfaction. The power of this stimulus is undeniable. What Hill discovered is that this power is not fixed in its expression. Energy, according to the fundamental laws of physics, can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be transformed from one state into another. The chemical energy in gasoline becomes mechanical motion in an engine. The potential energy in water behind a dam becomes electrical current flowing through power lines. The human body operates according to these same immutable principles. The intense energy generated by sexual desire does not vanish when it is not expressed physically. It must go somewhere. In most people, this energy dissipates through the path of least resistance, released in physical expression and then lost, like steam venting into the atmosphere where it can do no useful work. But Hill observed that certain individuals, whether through conscious practice or instinctive wisdom, had learned to redirect this energy upward, channeling it into their creative and professional pursuits. These individuals did not experience less of this drive. If anything, they seemed to experience it more intensely. The difference was that they had constructed an internal architecture that funneled this raw power into their ambitions rather than allowing it to drain away. This is what Hill means by transmutation. The word itself comes from alchemy, the ancient practice of transforming base metals into gold. Hill uses it metaphorically but with scientific precision. Transmutation is the process of taking energy from one form and converting it into another form of higher value. In this case, we are taking the energy of sexual desire and converting it into the energy of sustained creative output, business achievement, and intellectual breakthrough. The mechanism is not mystical, it is mechanical. Your nervous system is an intricate network of electrical impulses. Your brain is an organ that requires tremendous energy to function at peak capacity. When the body's most powerful energy source is redirected to the brain rather than dissipated through physical release, the effect on mental function is dramatic and measurable. Hill speaks of this energy as the fuel that transforms the ordinary mind into the extraordinary mind. Without it, thought is sluggish, weak, and easily disrupted. With it, thought becomes penetrating, persistent, and infused with a quality Hill calls vibration. This vibration is what allows certain individuals to impress their ideas upon reality itself, to broadcast their intentions with such intensity that the universe seems to conspire in their favor. The man who has learned transmutation does not think more thoughts than the average person. He thinks with more power. His mental broadcasts carry more voltage. His visualizations contain more creative force. His plans materialize more readily because the energy behind them is infinitely greater. This is why Hill insists that sexual energy is not just one stimulus among many. It is the primary stimulus, the master key to unlocking human potential. A person might have a brilliant idea, a carefully constructed plan, and every rational reason to succeed, but if the energy behind that idea is weak, it will fail to manifest. The thought will drift through the mental realm like a whisper, making no lasting impression on the formless substance that responds only to intensity. But when that same idea is charged with transmuted sexual energy, it becomes a command rather than a request.
An IQ of 85 to 115 is considered average in the US, and
It vibrates at a frequency that compels attention from the creative forces of the universe. It moves from possibility into probability and then into inevitable manifestation. Hill studied this principle not in isolation, but across thousands of case studies. He interviewed titans of industry, inventors, artists, and leaders, and he found the same pattern emerging again and again. The men who achieved the most were not necessarily the most educated or the most advantaged. They were the men with the highest degree of personal magnetism, the most intense creative drive, and the most sustained focus over years and decades. When Hill probed deeper, he discovered that these men shared a common trait. They possessed highly developed sex natures. They experienced this biological drive with unusual intensity, but unlike the masses who allowed this energy to control them, these masters had inverted the relationship. They controlled the energy. They redirected it. They transmuted it. This discovery led Hill to a controversial but inescapable conclusion. The very energy that society often treats as base, animalistic, or something to be suppressed is actually the secret fuel of genius. The men who achieve greatness do not have less of this energy. They have more of it, and they have learned the art of channeling it. The creative genius, the business titan, the visionary leader, each burns with an internal fire that would destroy a lesser person who lacked the discipline to direct it. This is why Hill warns that this chapter is not for everyone. It requires a level of self-mastery that most are unwilling to cultivate. It demands that you recognize your most powerful drive, not as something to be ashamed of or indulged without thought, but as a sacred resource to be guarded and directed with the precision of an engineer managing a nuclear reactor. The energy is convertible, Hill repeats, and this convertibility is the key to everything. The same force that could be wasted in an hour can instead fuel a month of brilliant, focused work. The same energy that could be squandered chasing momentary pleasure can be banked and invested in building something that lasts for generations. But this transmutation does not happen automatically. It requires understanding, practice, and an unshakable commitment to redirecting your most powerful impulses toward your highest aims. Most people never learn this. They go through life wondering why they lack the energy to pursue their dreams, never realizing they are pouring their primary fuel source down the drain every time they choose immediate gratification over long-term achievement. Hill's observation is stark and uncompromising. If you waste this energy, you waste your life. No amount of planning, no degree of intelligence, no quality of opportunity can compensate for the loss of your primary creative fuel. You can have the best ideas in the world, but without the energy to execute them with sustained intensity, they will remain fantasies. The transmutation of sexual energy is not an optional enhancement for those who want to achieve a little more. It is the fundamental requirement for anyone who seeks to rise above mediocrity and enter the realm where miracles become commonplace, where visions materialize into reality, and where the impossible bends to the will of a mind charged with the full voltage of its creative power. This is the secret that Hill buried in Chapter 11, the truth he knew most readers would skip, the principle he understood would separate the curious from the committed. Sexual energy is creative energy. It is the battery of genius, and the man who learns to transmute it holds in his hands the power to light up not just a city, but an entire civilization with the brilliance of his achievements. The question is not whether you possess this energy. You do. The question is whether you will continue to flood the village, or whether you will finally build the dam. Napoleon Hill's research spanned decades and encompassed detailed analysis of more than 500 of the most successful individuals of his era. From this exhaustive study, a striking pattern emerged, one so consistent that it could not be attributed to coincidence or cultural factors alone. Hill discovered that men rarely achieve significant success before the age of 40. This observation appears repeatedly throughout his work, but it is in the context of sexual transmutation that its full significance becomes clear. The years between 20 and 40 represent, for most men, a period of enormous energy, yet also a period of spectacular waste. Hill identified the mechanism behind this paradox with surgical precision. From their 20s through their late 30s, most men dissipate their most powerful creative energy through uncontrolled physical expression. They burn the fuel instead of putting it in the engine. This metaphor captures the tragedy Hill witnessed again and again in his research. Imagine a man with a high-performance vehicle capable of extraordinary speed and endurance, but instead of filling the fuel tank, he sets the gasoline on fire for momentary warmth. This is not an exaggeration of what occurs, it is an accurate description of the energetic reality. The sexual drive generates tremendous biological and nervous energy within the human system. This energy is meant to be used for creation, whether that creation takes the form of new life or new enterprises, art, inventions, or empires. When this energy is repeatedly released without purpose or direction, it is simply lost, converted into momentary sensation, and then dissipated as completely as smoke in the wind. Hill's data revealed that the men who achieved lasting success often did so only after they had learned, whether consciously or through the natural diminishment of youthful intensity, to conserve and redirect this energy. The transition typically occurred in their late 30s or early 40s, a period when biological urgency begins to moderate slightly, allowing for greater self-control. But Hill was quick to point out that this diminishment was not the cause of success. Rather, it simply made easier what should have been learned decades earlier. The most successful men did not wait for age to force conservation upon them. They learned the art of transmutation in their youth and thus gained a 20-year advantage over their peers, compounding their achievements while others were still squandering their potential. The mediocrity trap is precisely this: the confusion of energy expression with energy loss. Society teaches young men to view physical release as natural, healthy, and necessary, without ever explaining the energetic cost. From a purely physical health standpoint, the act itself may be neutral or even beneficial, but from the standpoint of creative achievement, it represents a catastrophic energy drain. Every release is the expenditure from the central battery. The nervous system must then divert resources to recovery, resources that could have been used for focused creative work. The effect is not immediately obvious because it does not manifest as physical exhaustion in the traditional sense. Rather, it manifests as a subtle but pervasive lack of drive, a dimming of ambition, a loss of the cutting edge that separates the extraordinary from the merely adequate. Hill observed that men in their 20s and 30s who engage in frequent dissipation of this energy consistently display certain characteristics. They lack sustained focus. They abandon projects before completion. They are easily discouraged by obstacles.
Are you looking for a legit work from home opportunity that's more than just a gig? This